Chapter 1, 184, Post-War, Summer 1994. August 1994. For the first week or so after Remus returned from Hogwarts, he didn't know how to feel. For the first time in a very long time, Remus was lost, untethered, drifting. He wandered around the flat like a ghost, going through the movements of everyday life, but feeling nothing. It wasn't depression. He knew what depression felt like.
"It's shock,"
said Grant.
"Oh,"
said Remus, staring blankly at the TV. Obviously, he'd expected Hogwarts to stir up old memories. He'd known from the start that revisiting the place could easily ruin him, but he'd done it anyway. Maybe he was a masochist, maybe just stupid. The castle was filled with ghosts from Remus's past, which was a deeply unsettling experience after spending the better part of a decade trying to forget all of it. The moment he arrived at King's Cross, it all came flooding back. The poky little train carriages with the worn-out upholstery, the trolley witch, chocolate frogs, the bustle and noise of students embarking on a new term. With the full moon ahead of him, he'd squirreled away in a compartment and promptly fallen asleep. Until the carriage turned cold and the Dementors... No. Anyway, ghosts. McGonagall was perhaps the strangest. She must have known he would be coming, but their first meeting had hit Remus harder than expected, and she'd seemed just as surprised as him. They weren't quite sure how to relate to each other now.
Mr. Lupin. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor Lupin.
"Hello, Professor.
Minerva, please."
She smiled gracefully. She reached out and squeezed his arm. She was every bit as formidable as she had been 20 years ago, only a little greyer at the temples. But then, so was he.
"It's wonderful to see you, Remus,"
she said earnestly.
"It's good to be back,"
he lied. Her eyes were soft and kind, as if she could see right through him.
"My office is always open if you need anything. As ever."
He appreciated the gesture, but didn't prevail upon her very often, largely because he wanted to keep to himself. He also wanted to stay away from Gryffindor Tower, if he could. The rest of the school was familiar. The lush, expansive grounds, the secretive forest, the food, the portraits, the staircases he had mapped so carefully. But Gryffindor Tower, the most intimate and happy space of his adolescence, that would be almost too much to recover from. He was put in mind of Homer, once again, the word nostalgia, which meant a painful homecoming. That was exactly how it felt. He didn't socialise much with his peers. The staff knew, by and large, about his lycanthropy, but he still preferred to avoid any unpleasant conversations, if he could. Were they tutting behind his back? Were they wondering about him? No one's seen him for years. He was Black and Potter's closest friend. What does he know? What did he do? Funnily enough, Professor Binns had forgotten Remus, but at least Flitwick hadn't. He was very kind, inviting Remus in to stop by the Charms classroom for tea and toast a few times. Remus did, to be polite, but found it difficult to forget all the times he and Sirius had locked themselves inside the kindly professor's classroom. He generally found it very hard to reconcile his adult self, responsible for lesson plans and marking essays and the welfare of students, with his reckless teenage self, wild and arrogant and madly in love. There were entire wings of the castle he actively avoided, for this very reason. He barely left his classroom and chambers except for meals in the Great Hall, and he never went to Hogsmeade except to quickly pass through on the way to the old phone box just outside the village, and thank God that was still there.
"How is it?"
Grant asked, the first time Remus called.
"Awful. Bearable. I suppose like teaching, the kids are okay. Actually, the kids are great."
"Well, just focus on that. First time I went into a remand home after St. Edmunds, I thought I was going to have to quit. I swear those places all smell the same. Anyway, you can get past it. If you remember, it's about the kids, not you. Be the teacher you wish you'd had."
This was good advice, and Remus did his very best. He hadn't had much experience with young people, but he very clearly remembered being a young person himself. He tried to organise lessons he would have found interesting, bringing in magical creatures whenever he could, like Ferox had, and giving extra tips and pointers wherever students were struggling. Really, it wasn't too different from the study sessions he'd held back when he was at school. Equally, Remus tried to pay attention to all of his students and learn their characters, their individual needs. That was incredibly weird at first. He found he had no less than 5 Weasleys to teach, one in almost every year. Then there was poor little Neville Longbottom, awkward and nervous and twitchy. Narcissa's son was in another class, the spitting image of Lucius, and then, of course, there was... Anyway, aside from Flitwick and McGonagall, the rest of the staff were virtual strangers to Remus, except, of course, for the potions master. Remus had really wanted to stay out of Snape's way, but from the very first day, it was clear that would not be easy. It was a full moon, and of course Snape was the only one who knew how to brew Wolfsbane Potion, the prick. He probably learnt how to do it just to torment Remus. It was bad enough they had to share a castle again, but Snape was hell-bent on making sure Remus felt his displeasure at the arrangement.
"Lupin, I was surprised to hear you survived the war,"
he said haughtily at their first meeting, just before the welcome feast. His lips curled.
"When it seems so many of your friends did not."
As foul as Snape was, it did bring out something Remus hadn't properly felt in years. Mischief.
Severus, and I was surprised to hear you survived the trials, when so many of your friends did not.
He smiled. Warmly, Snape sneered, and that set the tone for the year. Severus had clearly not forgotten the events of their 5th year. He was as despicable as Remus remembered him, and had not aged well. His hair still hung lank and greasy, perhaps a little further back than before. His black eyes were more sunken, and his nose more beak-like. He made Remus's skin crawl, but there was nothing to be done about it. They had to meet privately each month for the potion. The potion itself was utterly vile, and Remus resented it bitterly. It tasted awful, but worse than that was the effect it had. He still transformed, still suffered the agonies as his skull elongated, and his back split open, and his tendons creaked, but he fully retained his human mind afterwards. This was utterly horrible. Remus had come to see the monthly retreat into his animal brain as something of a catharsis, but having an animal body and human thoughts turned out to be very unpleasant indeed. He felt neither here nor there, trapped in the wrong form and unable to escape. He curled up to sleep, locked inside his office every month, full of self-loathing. In the mornings after, he would limp to Madam Pomfrey's office to ask for Murtlap essence. Of everyone from Remus's childhood, Madam Pomfrey seemed the most pleased to see him again. She had aged like everyone else, but had retained her gentle touch, her sweet face, and her no-nonsense attitude to Remus's well-being.
"Remus."
She reached up to hug him the very first moment she saw him.
"Just look at you, you giant of a man."
Hello, Madam, Poppy.
"As polite as ever. Come on, come and tell me what you've been doing with yourself."
She smiled. They had a few very pleasant catch-ups in her office, by the fireplace. She wanted to know everything about his transformation since Hogwarts, and he told her as much as he could. She was very interested to hear about the pack, and how they were able to heal each other by sharing group magic.
"I tried to get in touch with you after the Potters died, but no one could tell me where you were living, and I didn't dare ask too much in case."
She said sadly. Remus looked away, embarrassed.
I'm sorry. I wanted to be left alone.
He said.
"Yes, well, you were the same as a boy, stubborn."
She smiled fondly. He smiled back, realizing how much he had missed her. For the first month or so, Remus's nerves were raw. He hesitated as he turned every corner, worried that he might see something painful. But, as pain often does, this lessened over time. He slipped into a new character, not the teenage Remus who took risks without thinking, who was desperate to prove himself, and not the half-muggle, half-broken man he had been in London. Somewhere between these warring halves, he became Professor Lupin, restrained and serious, offering encouragement wherever he could. And this was all just as well, because that was exactly who he needed to be for Harry. God, Harry. Harry Potter was James and Lily seamlessly combined, all charm and cheek and strength and goodness. Remus had been worried, knowing that the kid's childhood had been far from ideal, that Harry would be difficult. Remus well remembered his own spiky temperament at 13. Cruel adults make bitter children. But no, Harry was as kind-hearted and open-minded as his parents, full of love and so generous with it. Getting to know him had been painful and joyful all at once. The first time they met, Remus had thought he was still dreaming. He woke up on the train, clawed awake by Dementors, those fucking abominations. He cleared the threat, and staring around at the faces of the frightened kids, found Harry passed out on the floor. Until he opened his eyes, he was James. Nothing could convince Remus otherwise. A bit skinnier, maybe shorter than Prongs had been at 13, but otherwise the spitting image. Of course, Harry had no idea who Remus was, and for as long as possible it stayed that way. How would he explain? Even after a few conversations with the boy, Remus was completely at sea, so he let Harry lead the way and answered the questions which had suitable answers. When Harry came to him asking for Patronus lessons so that he could keep playing Quidditch, Remus couldn't say no. It was exactly what James would do too, and when Sirius came up, he sidestepped it. Harry already knew that Black and James had been friends, and Remus wasn't sure what more he could say without losing the kid's trust. Yes, Harry, your dad was my best friend, but Sirius Black was my everything. No, it wouldn't do. What was more, Remus wasn't sure whether the wizarding world had its own version of Section 28. If he started confessing to stuff like that, could he get in trouble for corrupting young minds? It was bad enough he was a werewolf, By that time, it was already clear that Sirius was nearby. When the convict broke into the castle on Halloween night, Remus almost walked straight off the grounds and apparated back to London. Maybe he would have, if the perimeter wasn't swarming with Dementors, and of course the fact that Black was definitely after Harry. That made Remus furious. Hadn't Sirius done enough damage? He must have really lost his mind. He must have strayed so far from the young man who had cradled baby Harry in his arms with tenderness and awe. Remus used this as a reminder to steel himself. It was no use mourning Sirius. His Sirius had died many years ago. And then that night happened. In a matter of hours, everything changed. Fuck. Maybe Grant was right. Maybe it was shock. After being given his marching orders from Hogwarts, thank God, another year might have killed him, Remus took the night bus back to London, his mind churning over everything he had learnt. Events kept shifting and reordering themselves. Some things became clearer, others muddied by various versions of the truth. The things Sirius had said, the excuses Wormtail had snivelled, and everything Remus had thought he'd known, none of these accounts lined up quite right. The only thing Remus was certain of was that for 12 years he had hated the wrong person.
Please come back, please, please.
He wailed down the phone to Grant once he was home.
On my way,
Grant said, and hung up immediately. It still took hours. Remus changed into his muggle clothes, throwing Professor Lupin's shabby robes in a corner of the bathroom, and paced the flat while he waited, cursing the slowness of muggle transport. He didn't drink. He wanted a clear head. He wanted to understand.
Remus!
Grant burst into the living room, tired and dishevelled. He'd had a haircut in the past year. It was so short it barely curled anymore. Remus hated it, but said nothing, just ran to hug him.
What happened?
Grant asked, huffing as Remus knocked the air out of him, but squeezing him back reassuringly. He didn't look the same, but he smelled the same, and that helped. That was very grounding.
He was innocent. It was Peter all along. It was never him. I was such an idiot.
Remus babbled, still clinging on.
Remus, I don't know what you're talking about, please. Let's sit down, shall we? Christ, you're skinny. Don't they feed you at that school?
Remus allowed Grant to take over. He sat obediently on the couch, accepted a glass of water and a cigarette, because apparently Grant was smoking again, and the temptation was too much. The flat felt bare and stuffy, having sat empty for most of the year, and Grant opened the living room window, letting in the everyday sounds of foot traffic and pigeons.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Grant said, sitting opposite Remus, clasping his hands together in a very teacherly sort of way. Remus nodded. He was determined to speak. If anyone could sort all of this out, it was Grant. He was sure of that.
Sirius. I saw Sirius. And Peter,
he said.
Wait, Peter, I thought he...
Grant frowned.
No, he's alive. He's been hiding all these years.
Remus said darkly, his insides turning hot with rage.
From Sirius?
From everyone. He did it. He betrayed James and Lily. It was never Sirius.
How? So he was in prison all this time for something Peter did? Jesus. Okay, you're sure? He's the one who told you?
Grant shook his head, clearly confused.
Yes, but I know for sure. I saw Peter and I...
Remus faltered.
I just believe Sirius, okay?
The fact was that he had read Sirius's mind, and he was still trying to get his head around that. He tried to piece the events of the night together, for Grant's benefit and his own.
It was all Harry, James's son. He left the school one night, and I knew why, so I followed him. I was worried Sirius would try to. But then Peter was there. I saw Peter, and I didn't know what to think.
Something deep inside him had known at once, the second he saw Wormtail's name appear on the map. But he'd had to find out, had to know for sure. And then he'd got to the shack, and there was Sirius. Skin and bones and rags and madness, cackling on the floor, Harry standing over him, poised with his wand. The wolf part of Remus took over, recognizing that Padfoot was in danger, and he disarmed everyone at once.
Where is he, Sirius?
Then he saw the rat, and it all fell into place. His mind went rushing back to 1981, all the secrecy, the mistrust, the lies. He looked at Sirius properly, he widened his eyes, and almost without trying, he entered Sirius's thoughts. Show me, he commanded, using the same magic the werewolves used. Sirius's brain was half canine by that point, and maybe that's why it worked. Black resisted for a moment, no doubt recalling Walpurga's forced intrusions, but he nodded, and he let Remus in.
But Padfoot, I thought we were agreed.
James's voice echoing from a distant past.
I know, but this is better. Can't you see? No one will ever suspect Wormy.
Like a double bluff. It's brilliant.
Lily chimed in. Remus didn't need to hear any more. He lowered the wands and helped Sirius up and embraced him tightly. I'm sorry, he communicated wordlessly. I'm sorry. Back in the flat, tears pricked in Remus's eyes, and Grant pulled out a hanky, handing it to him.
So is he free now? Sirius?
No. It all got so complicated and It was a full moon. I only saw him for 20 minutes, maybe, and then I turned and so much happened without me. Peter ran away. They didn't catch him. I should have killed him when I had the chance. I wanted to. I was going to. But Harry stopped me.
Remus shook his head, collecting himself. Grant paled, his mouth a grim line. He didn't say anything, though.
By the time it was morning, Sirius had escaped again, too. He's in hiding, and I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever see him again.
Remus continued. He wiped his eyes and ran his fingers through his hair.
Fuck. All this time, and I believed it. How could I have been so stupid?
Hey, stop it!
Grant frowned, reaching out. Remus stood up abruptly, ignoring Grant and pacing the room once more, muttering to himself.
I should have known he would never hurt James. I shouldn't have been so bloody gullible, so weak. I should have tried to see him. I could have got him out of there. I could have tracked down Peter. I could have...
Remus, stop it!
Grant raised his voice. Remus looked at him.
I don't know what to do,
he said.
Me neither, mate.
Grant sighed. He rubbed a hand over his face, and Remus saw the rings under his eyes. Grant stood up.
But there's nothing you can do right this second, so I'm going to have a shower, right? Then we'll get dinner. Then we'll talk a bit more.
Remus nodded, eagerly. Yes, this was what he needed. A plan. Clear, defined next steps. Grant left the room, wearily. Remus waited, listening to the water running, trying once again to get his thoughts in order. He did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. He made a list. So, Moony, he said to himself, what are the facts? A surge of anger washed over him once more. He had believed it. He was as guilty as Dumbledore, as anyone else who had simply assumed Sirius was the spy because Sirius was a black. In fact, Remus was even more at fault because he ought to have known. No one was closer to Sirius than he was. Those last few months of the war were such a blur. Hadn't there been something wrong? Hadn't Sirius been distant, cold with him? In the years since, Remus had taken that as proof of Padfoot's betrayal. But now with a sick feeling, he saw it for what it was.
He thought I was the spy,
he said to Grant the second he was out of the bathroom.
Eh?
Grant frowned, trying to get past Remus, wrapped in a towel.
Spy? What? Oi, let me get dressed. Come on.
Remus followed him into the bedroom and sat on the bed, talking fast as Grant dried himself and put on clean clothes.
During the war, we knew there was a spy. We knew someone was passing information to the other side, but no one knew who. Afterwards, we thought it was Sirius. It all made sense. He was caught blowing up a street full of muggles and...
Do you have to call normal people that?
Sorry. Anyway, Sirius was the secret keeper for James and Lily. That means he had this spell on him, so only he knew where they were, to keep them safe. But he switched with Peter at the last minute, and now we know that Peter was the spy. And they didn't tell me about the switch. Sirius didn't tell me, because he must have thought.
He didn't trust you,
Grant said bluntly. Dressed, he sat down on the bed too, at a distance from Remus.
I suppose I can't blame him.
Had you broken his trust before?
Grant raised an eyebrow.
No.
Did you think he was the spy before James and Lily died?
No, never.
Well then.
Grant stood up.
I'm going to nip to the shop. We need milk and bread, toothpaste.
Wait, no. What do you mean, well then?
Nothing. Look, come on, come to the shop with me. Then I promise we can talk about it. I'll listen to you all night long if you want, I swear. I just want to get some food in you first.
Remus went along with that. He watched Grant cook, and he swallowed every mouthful, and then he talked, and he talked, and he talked. But it was no good. It came to nothing in the end.
If Sirius is in hiding, and Peter's on the run,
Grant said, yawning.
He'll go straight to Voldemort the rat,
Remus growled.
Right, okay, if Sirius is in hiding, then you can't do anything. It sounds like it's out of your hands.
Grant waved a hand.
Maybe I could send an owl, only that might give away his location.
And then you'll get arrested and sent to Alcatraz or whatever it is for colluding with a criminal,
Grant said, with an air of finality.
I just want to help him,
Remus said.
Of course you do, but I don't see how.
They sat in silence for a while, thinking. It was dark outside. Remus didn't know what time it was, but it had to be pretty late. Grant looked exhausted, and Remus felt a small twinge of guilt, on top of everything else.
Sorry to put you through this. It's not really fair of me,
he said quietly, reaching for Grant's hand.
It's fine, I do understand, it's just a lot.
Grant gave him a small smile, stroking Remus's knuckles with his thumb.
I know.
How was it, seeing him? I mean, how did it make you feel?
Remus shifted awkwardly. There it was, the thought he'd been avoiding. Because if Sirius was innocent, if he'd never betrayed James, then he'd never betrayed Remus either, and Remus didn't know what that meant to him, now, after so much time.
We're both so different now. I barely recognized him, really. I just felt sorry for him.
He said, aware Grant was holding his breath while he waited for the response. The flutter in his stomach told him he was lying. Grant leaned over and kissed him.
Everything will be all right in the end,
he said,